Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be talking about some scales and harmony in Hey Jude by the Beatles. This is my favorite song by the Beatles, one of their biggest hits, and kind of a peculiar song in a lot of ways. The first half of it tightly follows the rules of Western tonality as practiced by Mozart and Beethoven, and the back half of it really doesn't. So just wanted to start with this image of Paul McCartney from the promotional film, from the music video. He really was the cute one, wasn't he? Look at that face. So soulful. Just like this song. Alright, so let's jump into it. A couple interesting things about the writing of the song. According to Walter Everett, McCartney may have been inspired by two different things. One is this piece of liturgical music by John Ireland called Te Deum. You're going to hear the melodic similarity immediately. It actually diverges pretty quickly after that first line, but that first line is remarkably similar, yeah. And this piece of music is in F major, which is also the key of Hey Jude, and that is a somewhat unusual key for a rock musician to write a song in. So I wonder if Paul McCartney did that on purpose. The other similarity is in a song by the Drifters called Save the Last Dance for Me.
But don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. So darling, save the last dance for me.
Kind of reminds me a little of the shape of the melody of remember to let her into your heart, right? And the chord changes under it. I don't know if McCartney literally imitated those two songs or if it's a coincidence, but interesting to think about. All right, so let's look at the song itself. I've got it lined up in Ableton Live here. It's got a bit of a peculiar structure.
Hey Jude.
So it starts right away on this pickup, just this one note pickup, and then straight into verse 1. And the verses are just straightforward F major, could not possibly be any simpler. So here's the F major scale. And that first chord is Hey Jude. This is called the 1 chord because it's the chord that you build on the first note in the F major scale, or here we'll do it up an octave. And then it goes to the 5 chord, the chord that you build on the 5th note of the scale, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a C chord. Take a sad song. And then it goes to the 5-7 chord, which you get by adding another third on top of that C chord, and then back to 1. So here is, I guess you could think of that first note as being an implicit 5 chord too.
Hey Jude,
1,
don't make it bad.
5,
Take a sad
5
song
with a 7 on
and make
top,
it
1.
Remember.
And then to the 4 chord, the B flat chord. And from there back to 1. So here's the 4,
To let her into your
1,
home, then you can start
5,
to make it better.
1. Alright, so far so simple.
Hey Jude,
Second verse, exactly the same as the first
don't
verse,
be afraid.
except more instruments come in.
You were made to
Guitar, some
go
tambourine.
and get her. The minute you let her under your skin, then you begin to make it better. And anytime you feel the pain.
Alright, so what just happened here? Now we've got a new chord. We've got this F7 chord. And the top note in that chord is E flat. If I try to put a 7th on top of the F chord, I get this E natural, but we don't want E natural. We want E flat. As you can see, E flat is not in the F major scale. There's D and there's E, but there's no E flat. So what's happening on this chord is we're actually changing keys. We're actually leaving the key of F and we're moving into the key of B flat. So what I'm going to do is change the root here to B flat. So here's the B flat major scale. And the B flat major scale is very similar to the F major scale. They have 6 out of their 7 notes in common. Yet F is the same, G, A, B flat, C, and D are common between both scales. But the only difference is in F major you have an E, and in B flat major you got this E flat. And when you play the 5 chord in B flat, it's an F chord, and when you put the 7th on top of it, you got that F7 with an E flat on top. And then from there it resolves to the 1 chord in B flat. So here's what's happening.
And anytime you feel the pain.
So that's 5-1 in B flat. And now there's this nice little descending bass line on the B flat chord. It goes B flat, A, G, F. Just walks down the B flat major scale. But with the chord on top of it. Isn't that nice? That's a real Beatlesism, to just walk down the major scale under a major chord.
Hey Jude, refrain. Don't carry the world up on your shoulder.
But then there's a surprise. So we're walking down the B flat major scale, and if we were to keep walking down it, the next note in B flat is E flat, but that's not where the song goes. The song goes to E. We're not in the B flat major scale anymore. We're actually back in F major. Yeah, that E is the leading tone in F. And it's part of a C7 chord. And that C7 chord resolves to F. So it's a 5-1 in F major. And then that same thing repeats. That F7 is a 5 chord in B flat, and then that same descending thing again. And then back to F. And now something a little mysterious happens. We've got this F7 chord, and I know right back here we just said that F7 is the 5 chord in B flat, and maybe that's what it's doing here, but we don't land on B flat, we go back to C, we go back to the 5 chord in F. So I don't know, maybe this is a momentary switch over to B flat. It's also possible that this is not a key change at all, that we're still in F, but now we've got this bluesy F Mixolydian feeling. I'm going to explain what that means when we get to the end of the song. But whatever is going on here, it's certainly ambiguous. Anyway, back to the 5 chord in F.
Hey Jude.
And then back to verse 3, which is the same as the first 2 verses. Oh, I should point out, I'm calling this the bridge. A normal person, after the first 2 verses of a pop song, would do the chorus. I don't feel this section of the song as being the chorus. There's 2 of them, right? There's going to be another one right after this next verse. And they're different from each other. Like, they have different lyrics. You don't normally have different lyrics in a chorus. And also, it doesn't have that rousing kind of central peak of energy that you would expect a chorus to have. It really feels like a bridge. However, this is not the place in the song where a bridge would normally go. Also, a song doesn't usually have 2 bridges, and it certainly usually doesn't have a bridge before we get to the chorus. But Beatles songs actually do tend to be structurally a little bit peculiar. So I don't know. This interpretation, you could certainly debate it, but that's what I hear is going on. All right, so anyway, the second bridge is identical to the first bridge. And then we get the last verse, verse 4. And it's mostly the same as the other verses, but it ends differently.
Don't make it bad. Take a side.
simple F major. Alright, but now we get to the big build. Okay, before we get to that part, before we get to what I consider to be the chorus, there's this interesting thing. So chord-wise, it's simple. It's just an F chord, right? It's just repeating underneath it. But the melody is taking each note in an F major triad, but it's starting a half step below each note. So instead of F, it starts on E, and then goes up to F. And then instead of A, it starts on A flat, and then goes up to A. And then instead of C, it starts on B, and then goes up to C. And then starting on F, it goes up to E. So you get this nice better, 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 ah. Yeah, cool stuff. Paul McCartney, man. He knows how to write a melody. All right. Anyway, then we get to the chorus. And the chords here look like they could be in the key of B flat. Certainly all the notes in these chords look like they belong to the key of B flat. And you could play them all on the B flat major scale. So I'm going to switch to B flat major here. So we've got F, na, 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 E flat, it's the 4 chord in B flat, na, 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 and then B flat, na, 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 the 1 chord in B flat, hey Jude. That is technically correct, but that's an unsatisfying explanation. Because if you listen with your ears, that F chord does not feel like 5. It doesn't feel like we're suspended above home base, where there's like, it doesn't feel like tension. It feels like resolution. It feels like a landing place. It feels like the center. It feels like the tonic. And not just because it starts on this chord, but also because this little 4 chord figure also ends on F. Like that feels like the landing. That B flat does not feel like tonic. It feels like it's lifted above the tonic. Yeah, that feels like the tonic. And not just because of the metrical placement of the chords, but also because the melody, da da da, that's an F, right? The melody treats F as its center, as its root. So yeah, these are the notes from the B flat major scale, but they're oriented around F as the center. And when you play the B flat major scale from F to F, you get this scale called F Mixolydian mode. So I'm going to switch our scale here to Mixolydian. I'm going to switch the root to F. And this is the B flat major scale. It's the same as the B flat major scale, but we're just thinking of this note as the center rather than this note. So when you think of F as being the center, this chord progression is the 1 chord, then the flat 7 chord. Because that E flat is, if we're thinking of the note names if we're thinking of the scale degrees in terms of the major scale, the 7 would be E, but this is the flat 7. And then B flat is the 4 chord. And then back to 1. Flat 7, 4, 1. And this is a real classic rockism. Many other classic rock songs use the same progression. So Paul McCartney's vocal ad-libs come in, and they sort of follow the B-flat Mixolydian mode. But actually not exactly. McCartney is doing his vocal ad-libs using a different scale, the F blues scale. And here it is. Yeah, that is blues scale. Yeah, that is not Mixolydian mode. Definitely blues scale. And blues scale and Mixolydian mode go together like this. They share some notes in common. They both have that E flat, that flat 7. But blues scale has got minor third instead of major third, right? F Mixolydian's got that A natural. Blues scale's got the A flat. Also, blues scale's got that B natural in between 4 and 5, that sharp 4 or that flat 5. And in rock, you frequently mix Mixolydian and the blues, not just in this song. So, I mean, that's the music theory, but qualitatively, even if you don't know what modes are, you can really feel the difference between the major scale parts of the song and the Mixolydian mode parts. I mean,
Jude, don't make it bad.
That 1 to 5 is very characteristic of major scale, very characteristic of Western tonal harmony generally. In Western tonal harmony, that 5 to 1 movement, this movement, 5, 1, that's considered to be like the foundation of the whole building, of the whole edifice of Western tonal harmony. That 5-1 cadence. And if you study like classical music theory, you spend months on the 5-1 cadence before you talk about any other kind of harmony at all. But in rock and in the blues and in other kinds of African American vernacular styles, the 5-1 cadence is not necessarily as important. And in this section of the song where it suddenly turns from major to this bluesy Mixolydian feel, there are no 5-1 cadences. You got this flat 7 to 4, and then 4 to 1. That is much more typical of rock and of the blues and related styles. This flat 7 chord is very unusual in Western classical music. It's something that you hear in some like European folk traditions, but it's really more something you get from the blues. And when I've asked students to just qualitatively compare the feeling of the major scale sections of this song versus the Mixolydian mode section, they feel like, the Mixolydian mode, it's more serious. It's still joyful, it's still upbeat, but it's more complex. It's a little more grown up. It's got all the feels. The major scale section is a little more nursery rhymey, brighter, more optimistic. And some of that might just be the difference between, in the major scale, you've got this E natural. And in Mixolydian, you've got this E flat. And generally, flats are considered darker or sadder than naturals, by and large. And certainly when you get to the blues scale, there's a lot more kind of flatness and darkness. And in the accordion, we make the flat notes, the minor notes, blue to indicate that they generally feel sad, and we make the major ones, the natural ones, green to signify their relative kind of brightness and cheerfulness. So that is the music theory of the Beatles' Hey Jude. Thank you very much for listening.